Thanks for staying with us here on Newsnight. A Cape Town children's rights organisation says it has seen an increase in victims of sexual exploitation. The Molo Songololo organisation says minors are being groomed, manipulated and forced into sex by men that they know. The victims are also allegedly being forced to engage in transactional sex. We're joined now by Molo Songololo's director, Patric Solomons, who joins us virtually from Cape Town. Patric, thank you so much for your time this evening. A worrying statement released by your organisation, and it follows some in-depth engagement that you had with various stakeholders in areas like Atlantis, Delft and Beaufort West. And just looking at those areas, I know that those are areas that often do come up when we've seen surveys when it comes to these kinds of social issues that far too many of our communities grapple with in this year still of 2022. Can you give us an idea of what kind of stories you were hearing from those stakeholders in those areas?
Good evening to you and your listeners. Molo Songololo, we provide victim empowerment program in Atlantis, Delft and Beaufort West. So we look out for children who are victims of sexual violence, particularly sexual exploitation. So we keep a close eye on what's happening in those communities. Recently, since the 60 days of activism since last year, we've been engaging with stakeholders in those areas, and also to find out what are the gaps, what we need to do as stakeholders, how can we improve on our service delivery. And what they are reporting is that they see an increase in children who experience sexual violence when there's elements of sexual exploitation involved as well. That basically means that sex exchange for something, that the children have been deceived, they are being groomed, and they are given stuff in exchange for sex, right? So that is what they are reporting. The other thing that they also report is that they've noted an increase in the number of children, girls in particular, who become pregnant, right? Children who become parents, but children as young as 10 years of age are giving birth or having abortions. We just had, for example, news in one small town in the Karoo area. There's 10 children under the age of 15 years of age pregnant at the moment. Small town in the Karoo, 10 children pregnant. What we know is that less than half of them were impregnated by older teenagers. These girls were mainly impregnated by men, adults. And now that is a crime. That, according to the law, it's a criminal offense. But none of those men have been charged. None of those men, and no reports have been made to the police about them. And we also have reports in Delft, for example, where there's an increase. Our social workers and our auxiliary social workers raise the alarm that there's an increase in child vulnerability and also children engage in sexually exploitative practices. So there are boyfriends, these are men, who give them something for sex. The purpose of these men to have this relationship with these minors is to have sex with them. So they give them whatever food, they give them, pick them up with their cars, give them money, buy them clothing, give them airtime, give them alcohol, and they then, in exchange for that, they then have sex with these children. We also have, there's a case at the moment, for example, in Beaufort West. There's a police officer. We tried to get to report this case. He had sex, allegedly had sex with a minor, a 15-year-old. Police in Beaufort West who knows about this case, but nobody reported it. We eventually tried to assist the victim to report the case, but there was lots of barriers to report this case. We didn't want the child just to go to the police station and report the case, but we wanted the station commander to help make sure that the child will be properly received. But it was difficult for us to make this complaint and get the child's statement to be taken. Only when we had to report to, we then made a report to the head of the provincial child protection unit, We then also complained to the police commissioner and also to the police ombudsperson, and eventually the IPID investigated, and now this police person is charged with the statutory offence of rape and sexual assault of a minor, and also confinement of a minor.
Patric, if I could perhaps
now, if we did not intervene, this case would not have been recorded by the police, or the case would not, there would not be a docket. Now, there's lots of cases that don't get to the police and don't get prosecuted.
I can only imagine, and those small towns are where those kinds of stories go to disappear, don't they? So thank goodness for your team's interventions there.
Also in the urban areas.
No, absolutely,
but
absolutely.
Also in the urban areas.
Patric, if I could just ask you then, I mean, these stories that you, just some of the stories that you're able to share with us in the short period that we've got here, is there any understanding of what's really behind this spike or this increase that you're seeing in child vulnerability to sexual exploitation, in transactional sex that you've just told us about? I'm assuming the pandemic would have something to do with it, the economic strain that it's putting on certain households. Children weren't at school, which meant that they were left to their own devices, many not under any kind of parental or adult supervision, and I'm sure the list goes on. But what are you hearing in terms of the causes? And then one other question as well, what role are you seeing parents or caregivers having in this? I can only imagine that sadly in some of these cases the parents or the caregivers are involved in encouraging this transactional sex that you speak of.
Yeah, that is quite correct. And I think it's unfortunate whenever we hear stories like this, we focus on the child, we focus on the parents. We never focus on these adults who's having sex.
Yeah.
Never focus on these adults who are raping our children. Who are these men? These are ordinary men in ordinary households, in ordinary communities. They are the ones that are targeting our children, they are having sex with our children, and they are impregnating our children. And once they are finished with, if the child becomes older, they just go to another child. Some of them have sex with multiple children, right? These are ordinary men, these are sons and daughters, right? And there's also the role of women who facilitate the sexual exploitation of children. We also need to unpack that. And I think that's where we need to focus. There are men in families. A lot of time we know about these men. We see these men, how they operate in our communities. We do nothing about these men. And I think the problem with that is also that we don't report effectively because there's barriers that we experience when we want to report. And then, of course, the other level is that there's problems with the prosecution of these men. They often don't get properly prosecuted. Investigations are often probably flawed. And so those are the elements that we need to look at. Children by nature, at that age group, for example, they are highly sexualized because of their natural sexual development. They are easily manipulated, right? And they can be taken advantage of very, very easily. So you cannot blame. I just heard a report this morning about one province where there's over 1,000 children under the age of 15 who gave birth, and 10-year-olds who gave birth to children. The discussion was about the children. Why ain't the parents keeping the children indoors, and why don't they give them education all the time? Why don't we put the focus on the men? We all know the men who are inappropriate, and I think that's where we need to put the focus, and maybe then we will do a difference.
And in fact, it's one of the
men. Maybe then we will begin to make a difference.
That was very much one of the criticism that was leveled at the Education Department, who recently came out, and they should be praised for the fact that they finally came out with a new policy in terms of giving school structure and how they should be creating spaces and looking after pupils who fall pregnant so that they can complete their studies. Of course, too often these teenagers are not completing their studies because they fall pregnant, not because they're not allowed to complete their studies, but because of the stigmatization that they go through at the schools that make it impossible for them to return. But one of the criticism was that why are we focusing so much on these kinds of policies for pregnant teens and not looking at why these teens are falling pregnant in the first place and by whom they are falling pregnant? And that's exactly the point that you were making as well. You spoke there very shortly about the underreporting of these crimes, which is a massive issue. issue? Is it because too often the perpetrators are known to the family? Is it because of the stigmatization that comes with it? And do we in too many of our communities still see them as these dirty secrets that need to be kept, not thinking about the brokenness that it causes in that child or in those children that will follow them for the rest of their lives?
Yeah, it's no longer dirty secrets, open secrets, secrets that are glorified by the media, by everybody. The blessing culture that we have, to get something in exchange for sex, having a boyfriend who's got a car, who's got money, a man who can give you things, who can buy you stuff. That is the culture. So children grow up with that. They are highly sexualized as well. Parents give their children a cell phone. If you give your child a cell phone, that means your child will have access to sexual content. Your child will also then have access to people that your child don't know directly. And other people will also be able to get hold of your child. There are many cases that we have, for example, where the perpetrators ask for the child's cell phone number or organize for the child a cell phone. That's the way they keep in contact with the child, they groom the child, and so on. So there's this culture, the sexualized culture in which we bring up our children, and they have more access to sexual content, and then there's this sexual behavior. Adults behave inappropriately towards children, they groom them publicly, openly, but we don't do anything about it. So our silence, our inaction, also therefore is a cause for why that's why the men are doing what they're doing. There's no real consequence for them. We have a duty to report. All those responsible for working with children, from the police to social workers, to parents, to teachers, and everybody have a duty to report when the child is in need of care and protection. So when the child becomes pregnant or a child is involved in an exploitative relationship, you have a duty to report. Unfortunately, our reporting system is not working effectively. All cases get reported because for a lot of people, and also children, they're so desensitized to it and so normalized by these practices of my boyfriend gives me nice things and then I give sex to my boyfriend, right? So that is the culture that is there. So families condone it. There's some families that even encourage it because they get benefit out of it in one way or another, right? We also have mothers, for example, who, together with their children, engage in activities that is inappropriate and also sexual activities that is inappropriate. So there's a particular kind of culture. People have been desensitized to this, and I think it's been driven by the demand factor, by men who target children more and more. And then, of course, also the broader social context is of poverty-related conditions. We've seen increased job loss over COVID over the last 2 years, increased hunger, for example, children not eating properly, increased stress within the local community. So people, this makes our children vulnerable, and men know this. Men understand exactly how they need to manipulate. So those are the things that we need to look at and address. And then I think, of course, just to conclude, it is very, very important that we do not blame the children, right? We also need to educate our children between what's right and what's wrong, what's a crime and what's not a crime. Children at that age, children from 12 upwards, even younger, from 10 upwards, in a sexually developmental state. So they become interested in sex, they want to know about sexual stuff, they get sexual feelings, they might even experiment with it and all that kind of stuff. But we also need to tell them what is inappropriate, what is wrong, and what's a crime, right? And I think more of that kind of stuff need to happen. And then, of course, we need to put pressure on our police services, our protection services, that they need to make sure that when a child or parent comes to the police station to report that a minor, a person under the age of 16 years of age, is involved, whether it is in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, it is still a crime. Any adult who have sex with a minor illegal in South Africa, regardless of whether that child gave consent. And I think those are the kind of messages that we need to send out.
And that's a very important point. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, Patrick, and we have to end it there, unfortunately. But that point about making that space accessible for children to be able to access law enforcement when they need it most, a very, very important point for us to end this conversation on, a very important conversation that we need to keep having, sadly. That was Patric Solomons. He is the director for Molo Songololo, a children's rights organisation based in Cape Town. We thank him so much for his time this evening.